morning and welcome to worship. If you're worshiping with us at home today, our folks have gathered here in the sanctuary. We've already gone over some joys and concerns of our congregation. We invite you to share whatever updates or information you may have as well, and to have communion supplies prepared, as we will do that as we do each time we gather in worship. Third week today of a very short glance at the book of Joshua. This has been a fun experiment for me the last couple of months, actually, as we've walked through Exodus and then into Joshua, just continuing this story. I can't say it often enough. The Bible is one long, continuous story. It's kind of hard to follow sometimes because there's other stuff in there. You know, there's 150 Psalms that don't really tell the story, and you have to skip, right? You have to kind of follow where the story is. But these books follow right next one into each other. So we've skipped a whole bunch of Joshua. We were in chapter 5, I think, last week, and we're in 24 now. So basically what has happened is that all the things that God said were going to happen in the land of Canaan have happened. The people have crossed over the Jordan River, and they have taken control of the land. Now, this is not a particularly peaceful and gentle occupation of the land. In fact, it reads kind of like a Rambo movie. If you follow the story, there is a military conquest. And in fact, at one point, they list 31 nations or peoples or kings. I think they're named by their kings. 31 different peoples that have been displaced and or removed physically, right? So this is kind of, that's a different sermon. Today we're looking at this story here that happens towards the end. We're in Joshua 24. Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel at Shechem. He summoned the elders of Israel as leaders, judges, and officers. They presented themselves before God. Then Joshua said to the entire people, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Long ago your ancestors lived on the other side of the Euphrates. They served other gods. Among them was Terah, the father of Abraham and Nahor. I took Abraham, your ancestor, from the other side of the Euphrates. I led him around through the whole land of Canaan. I added to his descendants and gave him Isaac." And now we're going to skip about 10 verses that tell in pretty great detail what has happened since then. Isaac and Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. People go to Egypt. The people are slaves. The people are in the wilderness for 40 years. And then also there is a recap of how the people have made it to Canaan and taken over the land. And there's reference to the Amorites, which are one of the people that they have conquered, basically. And then it picks up in verse 14. "So now revere the Lord. Serve him honestly and faithfully. Put aside the gods that your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if it seems wrong in your opinion to serve the Lord, then choose today whom you will serve. Choose the gods whom your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you live. But my family and I will serve the Lord." Then the people answered, "God forbid that we ever leave the Lord to serve other gods. The Lord is our God. He is the one who brought us and our ancestors up from the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. He has done these mighty things in our sight. He has protected us the whole day we've gone and all the nations through which we've passed, the whole way we've gone. The Lord has driven out all nations before us, including the Amorites who lived in the land. We too will serve the Lord because he is our God." Then Joshua said to the people, "You can't serve the Lord because he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He won't forgive your rebellion and your sins. If you leave the Lord and serve foreign gods, then he will turn around and do you harm and finish you off in spite of having done you good in the past." Then the people said to Joshua, "No, the Lord is the one we will serve." So Joshua said to the people, "You are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen to serve the Lord." They said, "We are witnesses. So now put aside the foreign gods that are among you. Focus your hearts on the Lord, the God of Israel. the people said to Joshua, "We will serve the Lord our God and will obey him." On that day, Joshua made a covenant for the people and established just rule for them at Shechem. So all the points in that text where it has the Lord, remember that's small caps, if that came across on the slides, and that's a direct translation of the word Yahweh, right? So the Jewish people don't say the word Yahweh. They pronounce the word Adonai whenever it appears in the Old Testament text, and Adonai means the Lord, and so in English we get the Lord. So it's just a subtle thing to notice when the text says God or the Lord, and the Lord means Yahweh, which is a very specific reference. So to really try to understand this text of following, serving, worshiping only one God, we really need to kind of get into the mindset of what it was like to live around 3,000 years ago, which is around the time we think this is probably happening. So in our culture, let me throw up some terms here. And for those of you at home, I'm sorry these will be on the screen, but I haven't figured out how to get me and the TV screens on at the same time. So the word monotheism means the belief in only one God. And we as Christians in our country, that's generally what we think of as religion or of God. That we talk about the three monotheistic faiths, which are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. There's only one God, and actually the traditions of all three of those faiths would say that it is the same God, that it follows the same story, that worship the same God. So monotheism is what we normally think of in our culture. I think about being religious. You either believe in God or you don't believe in God, right? God is God, there's only one, so you choose between believing in God or atheism, which is you don't believe in God. The rejection of belief in God or gods. God with a small g, right? So God with a big G is a name, like Yahweh, the one that we worship and serve, follow. There are other little gods. And then that agnostic word, right? Agnosticism is the claim that the existence of any deity is unknown or unknowable. So in our culture, we have people who believe in God, people who are atheists and don't believe in any kind of supreme being. And then there are the people that are kind of in the middle. Those are the agnostics who are like, nah, maybe. Not rejecting it necessarily. They tend to be pretty thoughtful. In my experience, people who are atheists tend to be extremely thoughtful people and often are more knowledgeable about my scriptures than I am. Have you had a conversation like that with a person who's really, really, really dug into the scriptures of our faith and made a choice otherwise? So it's interesting. So there we have, that kind of fit what we see in our world, let's say in America, in our culture, Western culture. Those are kind of the three options, right? Do you know any polytheists? So in the ancient world, it would have been completely different. Like monotheism hadn't even been invented yet. Okay? It was not really something that they considered an option to only believe in one God. So the world in the ancient, so again, we're talking about 3,000 years ago, roughly, and this is, what point in history are you talking about, Kevin? Well, you could make lots of different claims, but in general, in the world around Israel and the Greco-Roman Empire, polytheism was the thing. Polytheism was the belief in many gods. And I went through that phase when I was in middle school of learning and reading about all the Roman and the Greek gods, right? Like all boys, I think, go through that. Or at least I was trying to make myself feel normal. So I used to know, but they all represent something different. One is the god of war, one is the goddess of love, one is the god of healing, right? There's all these different gods, but usually there is a supreme person, God, that kind of reigns over the others, but there are lots. So polytheism is the belief in many gods, very prevalent in the ancient world. So here's my new word for the week. Henotheism or henotheism. I looked it up. I had the little YouTube thing pronounce it for me, and I got both options. So it's either heno or henotheism, the belief that there may be more than one God, but only one of them is is worship. Now, why did I find that word? Because the commentary I read about this text said the people were henotheistic. They believed in more than one God, because if you don't believe in more than one God, then there's not a choice. Right? You can't, there aren't other choices if there is only one football team in the NFL, that would be kind of boring, but you root for them, you'd win every year, right? We'll get back to that topic in a minute. But so, in order for them to make a choice, there have to be other choices, and they have to believe that those other choices are real and authentic choices, or it's not a choice. Oh, I choose not to believe in the other gods that I don't believe in. Okay, the head's exploding, right? So for this text to have any meaning, we have to really understand that they believed that there were many gods, and they had the choice of worshiping or following any of those gods, and they chose to worship Yahweh. And that's the commitment they make. So monotheism, the belief in only one God, is still developing. And if you follow the big grand story through the Old Testament, and you read really carefully and closely, you'll see it start to develop later on in the 5th and 6th century before Jesus. As the people are in captivity in Babylon, as the prophets write, they start to come up with this idea that maybe this Yahweh God that we worship isn't just our own little tribal God that only is for us. Maybe that God is everybody's God. And this, again, right? Brains exploding. Like people are going, wow, that's pretty cool. What if the God that we worship and you worship, and what if it's all the same God? And so that's also a different sermon. So that's kind of the way it was back in the day. So I didn't look up Amorites. I don't know too much about those people, but one of the list of peoples that is mentioned in the book of Joshua are the Canaanites, right? The land of Canaan, the people who lived in Canaan were the Canaanites, and they were a very prevalent, proud civilization that had been there before and continued to be there afterwards. And they continue to have physical, military, strife with them. So here is a list of 24 Canaanite gods, and again, sorry at home that it's on the screen. And it's not even really big enough for you to read, but I just wanted you to be aware of what the choices were, right? So if you were a Canaanite and you were a polytheist, then you wouldn't pick one of these. These would be all, right? Like, so Abal Hadad, down there towards the bottom, was the storm god. So later on, we see a story of a conflict between Elijah and the prophets of Baal, which means the Lord in their language, and the fight is over who can make it rain. Well, who would you pray to if you wanted to make it rain? You would pray to Baal Hadad, right? you might work on this, farmers. If you need rain, Baal Hadad. Asherah is a name that comes up. Sorry, I'm going to bounce around. I just highlighted a few of these. But glance up and down that thing. God of fertility, goddess of war and strife. Next slide, Adam. There's the god of crop fertility. El Elyon is a name that actually comes up as a name for God that we use. It means the Most High God. El means God. Baalit is apparently a female version of Baal in the 1, 2, 3rd Eshmun. You see that? Asclepius is actually a Roman or Greek god of healing. And they have combined these two concepts from the Canaanite to the Roman and Greek. There's a temple to Asclepius in one of the cities where Paul writes, goddess of healing. The bottom one on that page, Lotan, serpent ally of Yam. I just wanted to say that out loud. Wouldn't you want to know Lotan, the serpent ally of Yam? I don't know who Yam is, but I am what I am, right? So, next slide. Moloch, a god of fire, god of death, king of the city, goddess of orchards and fruits, bottom of this God of plague and healing, Kadeshtu caught my attention because the Hebrew word for holy is kadosh. And in Canaanite, Kadeshtu means the Holy One. So look, we can see how close their languages too were one another. They were probably very closely related ethnically too. They came from the same land. And the final list, we have the word Shemayim, which in Hebrew is the word for heavens. When you read the book of Psalms or any time when it says the heavens, it's the Hebrew word Shemayim. Well, look what the God, through the Canaanites, the God of the heavens was Shemayim. That's the same word. And then there's Yahweh, a son of El and brother of Baal, sometimes married to Asherah, who was on the first page. So here's where this tradition of this Yahweh God comes from. And they, out of all those choices and all the other choices they experienced in Babylon before Abraham moved, that's where he was kind of in Iraq. All the gods, we could do the whole thing with the Egyptian gods, right? All of those gods that they experienced in the hundreds of years they were there. So anyway, they're surrounded by all of these choices. And Joshua says, all right, you got to pick. By the way, this is the one who your ancestors worshipped. By the way, this is the one who got you out of captivity in Egypt and got you through the sea and over the Jordan River and the water and the quail and the manna and the, right? Remember that stuff? And so this is a God who is faithful to you. So I first talked about this message, this idea of worshiping God and the idea of gods with a little g. About 20 years ago, I did a talk to a group of teenagers. And apparently this registered with them on some level, because I served at that church for about 5 more years after this happened, and they would bring it up in conversation. If we were talking about something else, one of them would say, oh, you mean like God with a little g? And I go, wow, yeah, well, where'd you get that? And they were like, well, you said that. And I was like, oh, that's cool, you remember that. So I remember the exact moment I gave that talk. It was 2000. It was February of 2000, I believe. I think it was the week after Derek Thomas had died. Right? So you probably remember our Chiefs superstar, Derek Thomas, had a freak accident in the ice. I was actually out driving in the ice that Sunday afternoon. It was a Sunday. I was doing some church stuff, and I was like, oh man, this is scary. Get home, find out Derek Thomas has been in a car accident. He is injured, and a few weeks later passes away. Well, just prior to that, what really brought me to offer this message to the kids, had we raised Derek Thomas to the level of a God with a big G, I won't mention Patrick Mahomes at this point, but have we done that again, George Brett? But what had happened earlier that year, on January 2nd of the year 2000, and I forgot about the whole 2000 thing, the 1990 season ended on January 2nd of the year 2000. The Chiefs had a chance to go to the playoffs. All they had to do was beat the Raiders at home. It went into overtime. Somebody kicked a field goal. We lost. And I remember being devastated, hurt. I was mad. I was physically ill. And if I'm not embellishing this story, and I don't think I am, I tried to look up, I wouldn't do that. I tried to look up what the weather was for that day, but my memory is that it was a lovely Sunday afternoon, and I was in the house by myself, and this is before Adam had joined me on the bandwagon of watching the Chiefs games, because Adam and Josh, he would have been almost 2, and Melody were out in the backyard, I think raking leaves. And not in the serious way that you rake leaves when you're an adult, but in the kid way that you rake leaves, and then you go jump in them, right? And I'm like, wait, gosh, I don't remember what a 2-year-old is like. Would that have fit? Would he have been out there running around at 2 and almost 6? And I was inside the house. I could see them out the window. They were right behind me. and refused to go out and enjoy the beautiful day and play in the leaves with my kids because I wanted to watch the Chiefs beat the Raiders, and then they didn't. So there's all of that stuff. Have fun with that. Go home. Psychoanalyze all you want. And that's the thing that caused me to talk to those teenagers I was working with at the time. I was just telling them, look, I have created a new religion, and I didn't create it. What's the most highly attended church on Sunday in Kansas City? Arrowhead Stadium, right? Even today, even these times when there's only 20,000 people there. Oh, okay, yeah, well, right? And you know that if they were playing today, I would have on my lucky Red Sox. So I still am a fan, and I was so excited when we won last year. And it's so much fun watching Patrick Mahomes. But I just try to make that a hobby, an interest, not something that I worship. I'm not sure I always get that right. So the questions for today are, what gods do we worship? And I would list the Chiefs and the we, or all of our sports heroes, or celebrities. I didn't want to just make this, often I start my own lists, and then I tell you what my lists are, and then so I wanted to get some other information. So I looked up, what do Americans believe in? What do Americans value? And I did a real quick Google search, and I found this really interesting website that is written by a group of people that's giving advice to somebody who's moving to the United States. So imagine that you grow up in another country with a totally different culture, and you're coming to the United States as an immigrant or a refugee, specifically for refugees, I think. And this is stuff you need to know about Americans. And it's written in a really cute way because they're writing to people that they know, maybe not read English, so it's written at a fairly simple language level. So they have 10 things that Americans value. And this is a pretty good list. I think it's pretty accurate. So here they are. Independence. Yes, no. Privacy. Yes, no. Directness. I'm going to just give some examples directness. In conversation, if an American disagrees with your opinion, they might tell you. This doesn't mean they do not like you, just that they may have a different idea. Well, that may have changed since they wrote this. Independence, privacy, directness, equality, right? Equality. In legal situations, all Americans should be treated equally. In a classroom, all students should be treated equally. Men and women should be treated equally. Good stuff. Informality is an American value, according to this source. Informality. Americans tend to call each other by their first names. That might be quite different in a different culture. Competition is one of the American values. Americans will schedule lots of activities. Even young children participate in lots of activities outside of school, such as sports, music lessons, and volunteering. Sometimes you may feel like they are rushing around, but Americans feel good when they get a lot done. I like that one. Americans may also compete with themselves. Many Americans work hard to keep improving at what they do. They may want to run a race faster than they did, or they may want to sell more items at their job than they did the year before. Time and efficiency are American values. Be on time. For a small party, arriving within 15 minutes is okay. I wanted to highlight that one for me because I'm always late. For a large party, you could be 30 minutes late. Work ethic is one of the American values. Consumerism. Another reason Americans may be object-oriented is because many Americans value newness and innovation. So even if they have a phone that works, they may want a new phone because it has new and exciting features. If you were moving here from another country, would you? I had a friend in seminary who was from Southern Sudan, and I think we had those conversations a time or two, like, well, Kevin, you have a phone that works. I could just hear Peter saying that. I want a new phone that works, So does any of those like jump out at you as being wrong or right, or does that pretty much sound like us? Now, I think any of those things, all those things are good at some level, but see how any one of them could be disastrous if that becomes my God. If that becomes the thing that affects my life, if that's the thing that is most important to me, then we've got a problem. Does that ring true? If you start worshiping any of those things, if you start worshiping celebrities or sports heroes, you're always going to be disappointed. So if those things describe Americans, then what describes a Christian? So Paul says that if we are Christians, if we are followers of Christ, if we have the fruit of the Spirit, then we have love, joy, peace, patience. Suddenly I want to slow down. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Is that a different list than independence, privacy, directness, equality, informality, competition, time and efficiency, work ethic, consumerism? Is that a different list? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. The prophet Micah tells us to love, to do justice, to embrace faithful love, to walk humbly with your God. Deuteronomy says to love God with your whole being, to love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus says to love one another as I have loved you. And those are the messages, a few of the many messages in our Bible, in our text, in our tradition, that may or may not match up with the other gods that are out there that you might follow, that are there, again, right? If the influence on you is not a real choice for you to be able to make, then it's not important that you make the choice. So all those 10 things about Americans, are those influencing? Yes. Is there another list of 50 things? Yes. Are you a sports fan? I am. Do you get really excited when you get a new car? Sure. Do you get a whole bunch of college degrees? Guilty. Like, why? Why? Put aside the other guides that are among you and focus your hearts on the God of love, the God that we see living among us in the life and the teachings and the example and the crucifixion and resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ. Let us pray. O holy God of Israel, you faithfully keep the promises you made to our ancestors and lead your people into the future, providing hospitality on the way. Help us to inherit the pilgrim life, to journey faithfully at your command, that we may be a band of disciples, called to be travelers in your service. God of captives and pilgrims, you brought your people home from despair and gave them a land of freedom and plenty. Look in mercy on us, your servants. Deliver us from the prison of selfishness and sin and bring us home to justice, sharing, and compassion, the realm you promised the world. You let us choose, O God, between you and the false gods of this world. In the midst of the night of sin and death, wake us from our slumber and call us forth to greet Christ, so that with eyes and hearts fixed on him, we may follow to eternal light. We pray these things through the Holy Spirit in the name of the one who taught us to pray, our Father, who art in heaven. hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Just a couple of quick little announcements. Again, thanks to all who have participated in our stewardship campaign. We still invite you to make those commitments if you're able to for 2021. I don't know that I've said that out loud yet. The main reason I wanted to put this slide up one more time is you win the door prize if you can tell me what that picture is or where it was taken.
In the chapel on the counter.
Yeah, that's one of our offering plates. And in the chapel on the counter, and I wasn't here when it happened. Bunny had it in her files, but apparently it involved her standing on a ladder, or at least a chair, and trying to get. So that is the commitment that you have from your office manager, and whenever I ask her, you enjoyed all the visual imagery she's been doing the last 6 months. She's just been, and I've stopped feeling guilty about it because she just says, "Oh, I had some fun today," and then she just goes and so the one for next week too. I won't give it away, but it's a Bunny original. So really appreciate her, and our stewardship and finance team will be working on that stuff. Didn't get that slide, so then December, I can't remember, the 6th, we're planning on having a board meeting. We're going to try to do it on Zoom at 2 o'clock that afternoon. There's an evening Chiefs game, so we always look at that. So we'll experiment with Zoom. I tried to do some Zoom stuff before then, so if you haven't ever used that platform, you can kind of learn how to do it. Which brings us to the next thing, which is the Advent. God, Advent starts 2 weeks from today. If you hadn't noticed, anything in this store is about Christmas. This is Advent Devotionals written by Teresa Owens, who is the president and general minister of the Disciples of Christ. She's been in office for a couple of years now. And we'll get the physical copies, but the very cool thing that really what I got excited about is that we bought 30 of these hard copies, and that means I get 30 options for an email delivery. So I will coordinate that with them. So and I'm talking to you folks at home, so if you're not able to get into church and you want to get, or if you want to get the thing by email every day, we can get all that set up too. Cool? And then what I'd like to do is to use that material to do kind of a Zoom Sunday school Bible study at some point during the week where we can talk about these. So you don't have to have the physical book. You can get it by email, and then we'll be able to talk about it. So we'll get all that more information out later. And thanks again for all of your help with Dave Hope. Didn't hear any reports of how that went, but I'm sure it was wonderful. And when John and Peggy and I dropped those boxes off, there was a whole lot of stuff getting ready to go out again to people in need in the community. So if you would gather your communion supplies or have them handy. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to the disciples and said, "Take and eat. This is my body." He took a cup, gave thanks, and gave it to them, saying, "Drink from this, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many, so that their sins may be forgiven." again, thank you for joining us today. If you're worshiping at home, thanks to all of you for being here today. Remember, as you go from this place, that there are many influences on our lives, many demands that are made on us. Many come from the outside, some of them come from within. And they are powerful, and they are tempting, and it may be really easy to confuse those with the message that we receive from God through Jesus Christ. That all are loved, all are forgiven, all are accepted just the way you are, the way that God created you. That after each day of creation, God said, this is good. This is good, just like it is. Can you make it better? Sure. Should we try to make it better? Absolutely. That is the mandate that we receive from Jesus. This is good. You can do better, but don't do anything to follow those forces that do harm to yourselves, to others. Do not worship those gods. Worship the ones that give life. Worship our God who gives life and gives life and gives life and gives life forever. Go in peace. Amen.